And I wanted to talk about this because the theme of today's conference is being about innovation. I read a report recently on the cider market by Mintel that said that the cycle of innovation in cider was over because people like Kopparberg and Rekorderlig have now done every fruit flavour you can think of, so there's no more innovation in cider, which is quite amusing. What have we got in cider? Kindly let me call things like this light commercial cider. There is a market for them. I've learned that you can't just tell 90% of people that they have rubbish taste and they don't know what they're drinking. It's not a nice way to win friends. They tend not to believe you. So there is a place for this stuff. It's light, it's refreshing. Before I started researching my book on cider, I actually quite liked Magners. I didn't mind going to a pub and pouring a bottle of it over ice. It smelt vaguely as if apples had something to do tenuously in its production at some stage. It was identifiably from apples. It was a weird colour, I didn't worry about that. And I enjoyed it. As soon as my palate developed, going around the world tasting all the world's best ciders, I can't stand it now. So it's kind of spoiled things for me a little bit, but it has its place. Flavoured cider, Rekorderlig and Kopparberg aside, there are products which really are cider made out of apple juice and they've got a bit of added fruit. If you're on a farm that's growing apples and you're also growing some blackberries, fair enough, why not put them in? It's fine, some of these products are really nice. It's essentially that when you get fruit, if you're using real fruit, and you ferment the sugar out of it the same way you ferment the sugars out of grapes or apples, you get a lot of fruit flavour without the excess sweetness, and these can be quite nice products. And your farmhouse scrumpy. I've been often pretty disparaging about products like this, but some of them are quite wonderful. If you get one that's really well made, if it's got nice and clear, it's still, if the cider maker knew what it's doing, it's got a little bit of tannin, maybe a little bit of farmhouse funkiness, but not too much, not too overpowering, maybe even a little bit of cheesiness. If it's all in there, it's not overpowering the apple taste. These can be really fine products. But moving on from these basic types, we've got French-style kieved cider. This is an extraordinary product whereby an entirely natural process of adding some kind of sort of chalky calcium type stuff. You take out the fermentable sugar in the apple juice, so the yeast exhausts itself. So naturally, without any additives or anything else, or without watering it down, you get a product at 3 or 4% that's still got a lot of natural sugar in it that doesn't carry on fermenting. It can be quite beautiful. Andy Hallett, who's talking later, has been experimenting and he's made a really nice kieved cider. I don't know if he'll bring any, but he's doing it. Apple wine. When you get these apples, if you go to somewhere like North America, where they have a longer growing season, they have more hours of sunlight, the fruit is bigger, it's got more fermentable sugars in the fruit, and so if you just let that ferment naturally, it can get up to kind of 10, 11% ABV quite naturally. They don't have many cider apple varieties, thanks to them all disappearing during Prohibition, so they're using a lot of eating varieties and culinary dessert varieties. So instead of the cider tannin that you get from cider apples, you've just got the sweetness and acidity. And a good apple wine like this can taste like a really beautiful Riesling, would be my nearest comparison. Spanish Cider, which is quite acidic. They have their own way of making it. They pour it from a great height like this into a glass. It explodes onto the side of the glass. They pour about that much, and for about a minute after you've poured it, it's got this natural champagne mousse from getting all that aeration on the way down. And so you knock it back in one and then throw the dregs away and completely lose track of how many you've had and get drunk very quickly. If you let it settle into the glass without doing that, it tastes like vinegar and it's horrible. But some people like it. But it's a really brilliant tradition. If you go to Asturias in northern Spain, they think they invented cider. They think they're the only place in the world that makes and drinks cider. It's quite wonderful that in today's age, there are all these little enclaves of cider. And then get on to some perry. We're just over the border from the world's best, greatest perry-making region. The 3 counties of Gloucestershire, Herefordshire and Worcestershire is the home of perry. Perry is a labour of love and a labour of hate. Perry trees are absolute bastards. They grow really slowly, they hardly bear any fruit. If you plant perry trees now, hope that your kids want to go into making perry, because you certainly won't be seeing any perry from it. Once you've got your fruit off, this fruit rots from the inside, so you think you've got a really great crop, and then you mash it all and it's all rotten inside. To make a good perry, you have to macerate the fruit, mush it all up and leave it there. If you do that, it's very likely it's going to get an infection and turn and ruin it. And even if you do all that right and you avoid all these things, it might just decide that it's going to go wrong, and you've got no idea why. The best and the worst drinks I've ever tasted in my life are perry. The worst perry I've ever tasted tastes like dog shit covered in nail varnish remover. The best perry I've ever tasted in my life tastes like the finest champagne you've ever had, but better, and with a slightly intriguing hint of elderflower and something else that's just around the corner, and you keep trying to chase this taste and pin it down, and it just keeps one step ahead of you and eludes you, and you think, if I have another glass, I just might catch it. I just might, what is it? It's there, I just can't get it. Oh, I need another glass. Oh, it's so wonderful. My wife, thank God she's not here, as my wife found out the other day to her cost, perry is also a very aggressive diuretic. I got a tweet from on Wednesday night saying, I hate Andy Hallett. Ice cider is a very new discovery. It was only invented in 1994. If you're familiar with the principle of ice wine, where grapes are left on the vine through the winter, they make a lot of that in, what state is Toronto in? What province is Toronto in? Ottawa? No. Anyway, that bit of Canada. Over the border in Quebec, they have the same winters, but they don't grow grapes. These guys tried to make ice wine, failed, then noticed there were apples hanging on the tree in the middle of January when it was 15 below, and tried to make ice cider. The water's exploded out on the apple, the freezing wind has cooked the apple, so when you ferment it, you get 7 kilos of apples going into a 33cl bottle. You get these flavours of toffee apple, fruit compote, this incredible intensity of sweetness that's balanced by a real intensity of acidity as well. When I wrote about it, the first time I tasted it, I said it's like drinking Starlight. And every time I have someone around to my house and I get a bottle of this out, because no one knows what it is, no one can find it or buy it, no one's ever heard of it, I get a bottle of it out, and after dinner we sit around and people go, that's beautiful, that's the nicest thing I've ever drunk, have you got any more? I'll say, no, that was it. Liar. I've seen your cellar, you've got more of it. No, I really haven't. Liar. I'm going to tear this house apart. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. Dinner guests turn into feral savages in their quest for more ice cider. You've got to try some. Once Upon a Tree, who are here at the festival this weekend, are the only UK manufacturers of ice cider and ice perry. Their product is not as good as the stuff from Montreal, but it's still better than anything else you've ever tasted. So do try and check it out. Calvados. When you distill cider, you get Calvados. If you go to Normandy, they make wonderful cider, and they're a bit bemused when people want to drink it, because they say, no. I mean, yeah, it's nice enough, but it's only the first step of making Calvados. We're only making the cider to then distill it to make it into Calvados. Beautiful Normandy Calvados from the Pays d'Auge. Just kind of triumphs all over cognac. And Pommeau, when you get some of the white spirit from the early stages, from straight after the distillation of what is eventually going to become Calvados, you age that in barrels for 3 years, then you blend it back with fresh apple juice. There's a whole economy around the apple and how to get more out of apples before we had refrigeration and year-round production and stuff. And Pommeau is like an aperitif or a digestive, sort of equivalent to sherry or port. Again, absolutely beautiful, huge taste of the apple, really intense, with a piece of cheese, you're just in heaven. So, I think I just showed you 10 different styles of cider there. How many of those are new to you? Maybe 4 or 5 if you're not in cider. I'm sure you knew the first 3, maybe 1 or 2 of the other ones. So the idea that we've seen everything that cider's got to offer is absolutely absurd. There is so much here. And the big problem that cider has at the moment is that people love it, they like drinking it, they enjoy it, but only 8% of cider drinkers think it's a premium product. 15% of them think it's a premium product, 8% of them think it's worth paying more for. So we've only scratched the surface of what cider has to offer any kind of food or drink business, really. And talking about food and drink, I just want to finish by talking about cider with food. We were having a conversation about matching at our table over lunch, and people do think still that if you're going to kind of have a glass of something with a meal, it's got to be wine. Now, the only reason we think that is because we take all our culinary cues from the French, and that's what they do. But food and drink from the same place, from the same terroir, tend to go together. And if you go into Normandy or Brittany, they don't drink wine with their food. They drink cider with everything. A moule marinière made with cider instead of white wine is exquisite. It really is. Even a fairly poor cider makes the best moule marinière that you've ever tasted. Cider and pork, you find every single combination of pork products and cider products, and however you put them together, they go together. Think about the kind of medieval feast of pig's head with the apple in its mouth. And it all goes back to that, apple and pork and apple sauce, any kind of cider, any kind of pork. The Basques, just with chorizo sausages in a stew, just with cider, just absolutely exquisite. A British pork joint with cider, anything. And cider with cheese, just absolutely incredible. And that might sound a bit unlikely, until I was in an organic orchard in Somerset with all these amazing cider apples, and in the next field there were the cows that made Montgomery cheddar. So it's the same earth that's growing trees on this side of the hedge, grass on that side. That grass is becoming milk and cheese. This grass is becoming cider apples. It's from the same land. It goes together. If you go to Normandy, if you go to the Pays d'Auge, you go to villages like Livarot and Camembert, which are actual villages, not just cheeses. But the cider that's made around those villages goes with the cheese that's made in those villages. It's absolutely stunning. So, with all the themes that we're talking about, with localism, with innovation, even with health, there's lots of new studies that show that moderate consumption of alcohol is better for you, not only than heavy drinking, but also better for you than teetotalism. Alcohol lowers blood pressure, it lowers stress. So long as you don't drink to excess to a point that's going to damage your system, you're actually healthier drinking cider than not. So all the themes we're talking about today are relevant to cider. So just to conclude, cider, it's the most versatile drink as well as the most misunderstood drink. And I guess we need some consumer education and also some appreciation within the food and drink trade to really kind of give it its full potential. It can be as refreshing as lager. It can be as slow and reflective as a real ale when you get the kind of deeper, richer tannin ones. It can be as complex and tannic as red wine. It can be as dry or as fruity as a white wine, that should say. It can be as zingy and vivacious as champagne. Herefordshire cider makers invented the method champenoise 100 years before Dom Perignon applied it to champagne. True fact. It can be sweet as intense as a dessert wine, the ice cider that we looked at. It can be as strong or as weak in alcohol as any of the above. It can substitute for anything from a low alcohol beer up through to a full strength wine or a sherry or port. And it can be at least as good a match with food and an ingredient in cooking as any of the above. And why is it relevant to this conference in this area? Well, Wales is actually at least the third best cider making region in the UK. Somerset is kind of the heart of cider making. It's the image that everyone has of cider. Herefordshire actually is where, I would say if Somerset is the heart of cider, then Herefordshire is the brain and the intellect of cider. It's where all the innovation and the ideas have come from. And over here we've got the same terroir, the same soil, the same climate, the same apple trees as Herefordshire. A lot of the farmers that supply apples to Bulmers in Hereford are actually on this side of the border. They're in Monmouthshire. And what we're seeing now is a lot of those farmers with long-term supply contracts for Bulmers are keeping a bit back for themselves, making their own cider. There's over 50 cider makers in Wales now. When we wrote the Welsh Guide, we couldn't say, okay, go to this shop and you can find this cider. It's not as simple as that. Some of these guys are making cider 1 month, not the next, 1 year, not the next. It's a wonderful treasure hunt to go around and see what ciders are there, what's available, what isn't. Some of it is people in their garden sheds, and some of it is kind of quite established businesses now. But it's a wonderful treasure hunt and a wonderful product to have in your portfolio. Cheers, thank you very much. Taste some later.